I'm Dr. Ava Cadell, your personal certified loveologist, to help you make love a priority in your life, get rid of any guilt or shame, and enjoy your natural sex drive. Our hot topic tonight is all about sex addiction. And I'm not talking about your natural horniness. I'm talking about sex addiction. So stay tuned to find out if you have the symptoms of a sex addict. And you can call in with your questions and your comments on our toll-free number. It's 1-877-711-5611, or email me at questions@wetalksex.com. By the way, it's not easy for some people to talk about sexual addiction or even to take it seriously, because some of you out there probably think that being oversexed is normal and natural. And, you don't think that it could affect your ability to have intimate relationships. But I'm here to tell you that it can. Yes, sex addiction can interfere with your concentration at work. It can deplete your finances. It can destroy relationships. We are talking about sexual addiction today, and later on in the show, our celebrity has nothing to do with sexual addiction. He is a handsome actor, producer, director, Damian Chopper, who will talk about his new movie called Bad Cop, starring the late legend David Carradine. So make sure you stay tuned for that. But right now, we are talking about sex addiction. So who is a sex addict? Well, actually, it can affect anyone, including you. And by the way, lots of celebrities have been alleged sex addicts, including David Duchovny, who voluntarily entered a facility for the treatment of sex addiction. Remember Michael Douglas? He was labeled as a sex addict by his ex-wife, and he sought treatment in an LA clinic. Now, both Gene Simmons and Charlie Sheen claim to have had sex with over 5,000 women. So what do you think? Do you think they're sex addicts? Eric Benet was thrown out by the gorgeous, sexy Halle Berry for his infidelity and sex addiction, silly guy. And what about women? Yes, they can be sex addicts. In fact, Amy Winehouse may not only be addicted to sex, but also drugs and rock and roll. And who can forget ex-Pres Bill Clinton, who had sex in his Oval Office while he was on the phone to Congress? So what is a sex addict? It's somebody who cannot control their sexual obsession and behavior with sex. So sex dominates their life, making it hard, excuse the pun, to have healthy relationships. And it can interfere with their social, financial, and their work lives. Now look, there is a difference between a healthy dose of sex craving and a life-destroying addiction. A person with a high sex drive is horny, and they want to have a lot of sex, but also they're satisfied when they have sex. The sex addict, on the other hand, spends a lot of time pursuing sexual conquests and is willing to take risks, such as having one-night stands with unprotected sex, despite the negative and dangerous consequences, and they are never satisfied. So, you might be interested to know that some people actually use sex addiction as a way to cope with their stresses. And they refer to sex as their medication for a quick fix. Yep. Give us a call right now if you want to talk about your sex addiction at 1-877-711-5611. And I'm going to give you some symptoms of a sex addict so you can determine if indeed you are addicted to sex. I believe we have someone on the line. We have, let me see, we have several people on the line. Oh my goodness. We have, Laura. Laura is on line 3 from Florida. Hi, Laura. This is Dr. Ava. What do you have to say about sex addiction? Laura's gone. Okay. Maybe she's gone to have sex. So here are some of the symptoms, you guys and gals. Do you think about sex so often that it interferes with your concentration? Are you obsessed with a specific sexual act, such as blowjobs, anal sex, or having sex in public places? Are you finding your sex habits are affecting your ability to manage your life? Do you feel that you're entitled to have sex with whoever you want? Would life have absolutely no meaning for you without sex? Do you think that sex is the only thing that really gives you value? Do you use sex as an escape from your problems? Have you ever had sex with someone you didn't even like? Do you keep a list of your sex partners? Do you need the high that dangerous sex and the risk of being caught can promise you? Are you completely unconcerned about catching an STD? And finally, the final question, do you feel powerlessness over controlling your sexual urges? If your answer to all of these questions is yes, then you are potentially a sex addict, and you should start by admitting that you have a problem instead of waiting for a disaster to occur, such as losing your job or breaking up your marriage, getting arrested, or even having a major health crisis. Now, we have a lot of fun here on Sex Drive, where I do promote sexual health, intimacy, and all kinds of exciting and consensual sexual activities like erotic massage and oral sex, anal sex, sex toys, power play, even sexual taboos. But sexual addiction is a serious problem that can lead to destruction, and some people have a propensity to addiction because of their genetics or because maybe they were abused in the past. There are also all kinds of biochemical abnormalities, but we'll get into that later. We have the lines open. Please give us a call at the toll-free number 1-877-711-5611. And Christy is back. She's on line 5. Hi, Christy. This is Dr. Ava. What is your question? I'm sorry. Christy has gone again. Let's talk to Melody on line 5.
Hi, Dr. Ava.
Hi, Melody. How are you?
I'm great. I'm very interested in this topic. I'm a therapist, and I have a practice in Texas.
Yes.
And I've worked with people who've had that problem, and in fact, it's a problem that one might have seen me as having at one point in my life. Because I haven't heard you say this, but you did refer to the idea that people medicate their feelings with sexual acting out.
That's right.
And in my experience, and I'm wondering if that's been your experience too, that most of the time people who have that problem have a history of some kind of sexual trauma?
I wouldn't say most of the time, but that is definitely one of the causes. Absolutely. I mean, there's personality disorders rather, like bipolar and paranoia, and
right.
the biochemical abnormalities where your brain tells you that it's good
sort
to
of
have
obsessive compulsive, yeah.
Right, obsessive. But yeah, a lot of sexual abuse. There is a study that shows that 82% of sex addicts reported being sexually abused as children.
Yeah,
so
that's a huge number.
It's a huge number, and I really thank you for bringing that up. And another study showed that 80% of recovering sex addicts reported some type of addiction in their family, whether it was nicotine or alcohol. So there is hereditary and genetics, and then there is when you've been abused, you abuse others. It's like a vicious circle.
Right, and one of the problems, of course, is that, most of the people, I think, who are suffering from sexual addictions, they are running so hard from their trauma history, they may not even be aware that that's what's driving it. I know for myself when I was younger that, a lot of the things that you described, there wasn't really so much about the sex necessarily, although the behavior was a sexual behavior. It was more about that need to have a sense of power and control.
Right, absolutely.
And that's what drove me to, do those crazy things, doing the Looking for Mr. Goodbar thing when I was in my early 20s, And I think there were a lot of us that did that in those days, and I think that largely was out of us that sense of our lives felt out of control, and it was a way to get a sense of power and control back that we didn't have. And I know for myself, because of my own sexual trauma history, that was a huge piece of it.
Thank you so much for calling, Melody. We are going to a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk to Steve from Florida, who has a comment or a question about sex addiction. So stay tuned. This is Dr. Ava, and you are listening to Sex Drive. Give us a call at 1-877-711-5611.
Here's your host, Dr. Ava.
Welcome back, and you are listening to Sex Drive, where we talk love, relationships, and sex. If you have questions, I have answers, so give me a call at the toll-free number 1-877-711-5611. And we have Steve on the line from Florida. Hi, Steve. This is Dr. Ava. How are you doing tonight?
I'm not too bad, Dr. Ava. Good evening. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Oh, great.
Actually,
what is your question or your comment?
Actually, I heard the topic of your show was sex addictions.
Yes.
And actually, I was confused about that. Well, how can an act that is so powerful, that can bring, even though when people are sad and miserable, it can bring them peace and satisfaction, even for a brief moment, or even when people are happy, excited. It's a, form they call that making love. Mm-hmm. And it's something that's so widely promoted. I mean, if it brings some kind of peace or love or some kind of satisfaction, I mean, how is that really a really bad addiction?
Well, it's only an addiction if it starts destroying your life. If sex becomes so obsessive that you can't focus on your work, on your family, on your social life, on your finances, it becomes dangerous. And I think I gave about 12 symptoms of a sex addict, and you don't sound like one of those. You sound like you have healthy, loving, erotic, fabulous sex at an appropriate time with somebody who's worthy of having you. I'm talking about sex addiction when you're out prowling and just having one-night stands without protection. You don't even like the person. You don't even know their name. It's an obsessive compulsive disorder.
So, that sounds like half the men in America.
Like what?
That sounds like half the men in America.
Oh, half the men in America. Well, there are more male sex addicts than women. It's true. But I think it's about control. If you can control your sexuality, then you're not a sex addict. I mean, most people do have self-control because they know the consequences if they don't. I mean, like, you have a choice to get up and go to work in the morning, or you have a choice to get laid by as many people as you can. Which one are you going to do?
Well, it depends on my situation at the time. Most likely, I'm going to try to get laid.
Are you serious, Steve?
Being a guy.
Okay.
In society, being a guy, that's the first thought that's going to come in my head. But, I mean, realistically, I'm probably going to try to get my finances first. Now,
right, you sound like a productive guy.
If somebody does have a situation like that, how would they go about controlling that?
Well, if you can't control your sexuality and you take the risk of losing your job and losing your finances and alienating your family and your friends in order to get laid, then I'm here to tell you that you should seek help. Whether it's with a therapist, one-on-one, or, a sexual addiction recovery, a resource on the internet. You have to identify first that you are a sex addict and then seek help. And there's lots of different kinds of help, from 12-step programs to one-on-one, behavioral therapy to group therapy. And some people even respond well to medications that can treat mood symptoms. So the fact that you're calling is really good. It means that this is on your mind, and maybe you do have a propensity to be a sex addict.
Never thought of it that way before.
Well, keep listening to the show, because I know I have some people calling in. I have a very dear friend who specializes in sex addiction. So keep listening, and I really appreciate your call, Steve. I think you've opened up a lot of people's minds to whether or not they are addicted to sex. Thank you so much for calling.
Thank you for taking my call.
This is Dr. Ava Cadell, and you are listening to Sex Drive. If you've been raised to think that sex is bad, I'm here to tell you otherwise. But if you are a sex addict, I'm here to tell you that there is help for you. And there is a very definitive line between being horny and healthy sexually and being completely out of control. The phone lines are open, and we have Dr. Don on line 4. He is the sex doctor that I was telling Steve about. Welcome, Dr. Don. How are you?
I'm doing great, Ava. Thanks for having me on your wonderful show.
Oh, you're welcome. I love Dr. Don. He is a sex therapist, and I have actually referred patients to him who are sex addicts. So, Don, why don't you tell our listeners how you treat sex addiction?
There's 3 steps to it, which is discovery, finding out why they're medicating themselves with sex, because that's what they're doing, is something's going wrong in their life inside of them. So their discovery is the way to find out what's happening with that. Then once we have an idea of why it's in place, then we get to the coping mechanism, which can often involve hypnotherapy, or it can involve being involved with 12-step groups. It involves life assignments. There are quite a number of ways. I also do phone counseling across the world, and people can find me on my website at maximizesuccess.com. And, then the third phase is relapse prevention. Once you have begun to cope with this, there's a lot of dangers. This is a very easy addiction to fall back into. So you need a lot of help in terms of having a focus in your life. It isn't a matter of going cold turkey. It's a matter of having a healthier life. Sometimes it's doing better financially, which I help to guide people with, or to have a great love life, a great relationship that takes them away from what they were doing sexually and acting out.
So, Dr. Don, you don't make them stop having sex altogether in your treatment, do you?
No. It's up to the person. One of the things we do in the treatment, in the coping portion of that, is setting what sobriety is for that person. And that might be having several sexual partners, or it may be focusing on one relationship. But that's part of the individualized work, is customizing it so that it fits for who they are as a person. Sex is vital to life. It's not a matter of giving it up. It's a matter of doing it in a healthier way.
And I second that. I completely agree with you. I think that sex is a basic instinct. So, trying to repress it can only bring out other bad personality and behavioral traits. So I love the way that you treat people that suffer from sex addiction. You customize it. You have a very loving and empathetic way of working with them. So just give out your website one more time, Dr. Don.
It's Maximize Success. I do phone counseling across the world, and then I have an office over in Los Angeles.
Thank you, sweetie. Thank you so much for calling. You are listening to Dr. Ava on Sex Drive, and we are talking about sex addiction. The lines are open, and we are going to talk right now to Carrie from New Mexico. Hi, Carrie. This is Dr. Ava.
Hello, Dr. Ava.
Hi, sweetie. What's your question?
Well, I was wondering, I know a lot of people talk about sex addiction as being a physical and psychological thing, and I was just wondering, what if you don't actually have sex all the time, but you think about it all the time? Does that make you an addict?
No, not unless it destroys your life. If you think about sex and you neglect everything else in your life, then yes, you could be an addict. But if you just think about it a lot, it just means you're a very sexy lady. Do you but do you masturbate all the time?
No, I don't masturbate all the time. I just constantly think about it.
Well, maybe you should masturbate more, and then you won't think about it so much, because masturbation is good for your health at least once a day. However, having said that, you can be addicted to masturbation. And so you have to be very careful, because masturbation is the first sexual behavior that most of us do repeatedly. And so you don't want to do it 10 times a day, but once a day will keep the doctor away.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Thank you so much for calling. We have so many other people on the line. When we come back, we are going to talk to Crystal from Bliss Connection. She knows quite a lot about sex addiction. I'm sorry to have kept you waiting, Crystal, but I am looking forward to speaking to you when we get back. This is Dr. Ava. Give us a call at 1-877-711-5611. Ask me anything about love, relationships, intimacy, or sex. If you have questions, I have answers. Welcome back to Sex Drive, where we know that sex is between the ears, not just between the legs. Give us a call at 1-877-711-5611 or email us at questions@wetalksex.com. And I have a lot of emails, so I'm just going to answer a couple of brief ones. One says, why is porn so addictive? The answer is because addiction to porn is usually combined with addiction to masturbation, as the visual fantasy that's created by porn can meet a sex addict's emotional and sexual needs. Well, at least temporarily, until they need the next fix. And here's another email. Are there more men or women sex addicts? Well, right now, research shows that there are more men sex addicts, but the number of women is growing, and the behaviors, by the way, are the same, including masturbation, porn, and risky one-night stands. And one more quick email before we speak to Crystal. It says, I am married to a sex addict, but he won't have sex with me. Can you help me to understand why? Yes, unfortunately, your husband is avoiding normal relational sex because he has what is called sexual anorexia, which means that he prefers to fantasize or have sex with others rather than having sex with you. So do your best to get him to seek help. And being married to a sex addict, I know, is painful, so make sure that you get help for yourself too. There are lots of support groups for wives as well. So let's turn back to the phones and talk to Crystal from Bliss Connection. Welcome to the show, Crystal.
Hi, Dr. Ava. Thank you so much for having me on. We're all so much better off now that you have your own radio show and you're educating all of us about better sex.
Thank you. Well, you know a few things about sex. So what have you got to say about sexual addiction, Crystal?
Oh, gosh, so many things. But I was just thinking about the last question that you just read about the woman who's married to the sex addict. And I guess my words of advice to her would be, do not take it personally, because I'm sure it probably wounds her very deeply that, you know, he wants to go around and have sex with everybody else on the planet but her. I'm sure she probably takes that really to heart, but it really has nothing to do with her or how she looks or anything about her at all. It's just that he has this problem, and it's pretty serious when it gets that bad.
Yeah, and you know, my question would be, how was he before they were married? I don't know how long they've been married, but I have a feeling there were probably some warning signs that she ignored. Do you agree with that, Crystal?
More than likely, he was probably doing a lot of online surfing for porn, or, you know, chat sites or rooms where people meet up for online sex. I'm sure that there was something definitely leading up to it that she might have been ignoring.
Definitely, or he was always unfaithful to her and she just didn't want to know.
Yeah, sometimes we have to get to a certain point in our life when we're ready to face, you know, these things that we know have been kind of just lingering out there too. So maybe she's just at a stronger point in her own relationship with herself where she's ready to face up to it. But I feel for her because I'm sure she's taken it very personally, and it really has zero to do with her. I've talked to hundreds of people, thousands of people in the form of our pleasure parties, and, I hear from women a lot about their husbands who, they rather than coming to bed with them at night, they go to bed at 11 and their husband stays up on the computer until 1 or 2 in the morning, and, they're wondering if something going on. I'm like, you should definitely trust your instincts.
Definitely. So, you are an expert on sexuality. You have your own radio show, correct?
Yeah, I do. BetterSexRadio.net, and we just do 1 hour a week on Wednesday mornings, and we stream live, and we have kind of like your show, but without the celebrities, although I did have a few adult film stars on my show, but we do talk every week about how to help people have better sex, and sometimes sex addiction does come up, of course, at our pleasure parties and on our radio show.
So where do you think is the line between just being horny and having a really healthy sex drive and being a sex addict? If you had to really describe where that line is, how would you describe that?
I think a lot like what you said, which is, when it gets in the way of their real life, if they're neglecting their relationships, they're neglecting their job, their financial situation, and they keep doing, this behavior that makes all of those things just worse and worse. I think that's just like any addiction, right? When you overdo it and you neglect everything else, that's a sign of somebody who's addicted.
Everything in moderation, right?
Right, of course. And, I think the woman that called in that said she thinks about sex all the time, she seems perfectly healthy. I mean, obviously, if she's worried, she should maybe take it up a little bit more with Dr. Dawn and do a phone consultation. But sounds like she's just a young woman who's got a high libido, and maybe she's got a great imagination, and she thinks about it all the time, but she doesn't act out on it. So I think she's probably okay too.
I agree. Now, I've been a guest on your show, so why don't you give out your radio show information one more time so that people can listen to you on Wednesday mornings and listen to me on Wednesday evenings?
I love that. Yeah, I put it out on my Facebook too that you were going to be on tonight and that I was going to be on here. But thank you so much, because Dr. Ava was one of my very first guests on my first show in February, and it was fabulous and such an honor to have you on. If your listeners want to tune in to our podcast that you and I did on February 4th, they can go to BetterSexRadio.net and join my Bliss community and listen to our radio show, and then tune in and listen to you at night.
Thank you, Crystal. Thank you so much for calling.
Thanks, Dr.
This
Ava.
is Dr. Ava, and you are listening to Sex Drive. We are going to take a call from Richard, but before that, if you want to talk to me tonight, give me a call at 1-877-711-5611. It's toll free. Or if you're out of the United States, call me at 772-978-9099. We love our international listeners as well. So, Richard, thank you for being so patient. This is Dr. Ava. What is your question?
Well, Dr. Ava, you read my mind. I was going to ask what you just asked Crystal, and that is, how does one know if they're just, the difference between just being sexually energetic, if you will, versus being addicted? So let me kind of ask a different angle to that question. I mean, how does this develop, and how is it different from like drug addiction or alcohol addiction? I mean, how does one end up being a sexual addict versus one of those other ones, and how does that develop?
Well, it develops like any other addiction to nicotine or alcohol. Those are the most common, so we'll use those. Sometimes it just develops from a lot of stress. It doesn't even have anything to do with hereditary. And sometimes there really is a biochemical abnormality. See, what happens is the brain tells the sex addict that having illicit sex is good, the same way that it tells an overeater that overeating is good. So the addicted brain fools the body by producing these intense biochemical rewards, their levels of PEA that boost euphoria for self-destructive behavior. And that's very common. And so, it's not always your fault. It's your body. It's your brain. And sometimes you just need to seek help as soon as you feel out of balance, as soon as you feel that there's this destructive uncontrollable urge that's taking over your life. Whether it's overeating, over drinking, over drugging, or over sexing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it's not sexual addiction necessarily because you are just very sexually imaginative or it happens to be on your mind a lot, as long as you're not being unconstructive in other areas of your life. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, I mean, look, there are guys like Gene Simmons and Charlie Sheen who I don't think would call themselves sex addicts, but both have admitted to having had sex with over 5,000 women. They love women, and they can have sex with whoever they want. They're rich, they're good looking, they're powerful, they're fun, they're sexy, and so they take advantage of that. But they're both very productive. Charlie Sheen has a hit show. Gene Simmons is an incredible entrepreneur, smart, man. So they really are not sex addicts because their sexual behavior is not destroying their lives.
Okay, well, it's a very interesting topic. Thank you for having it tonight.
Thank you so much for calling. It was great talking to you.
Okay, you too, Dr. Eva.
We are going to be right back with my celebrity guest, the handsome, intense, talented actor, producer, writer, and director, Damian Chapa, who has appeared in dozens of major movies, including Under Siege, Street Fighter, Mexican American, Blood In, Blood Out. Don't go away. He's going to have a lot to say about his brand new movie, which is coming out next week, by the way. It's called Bad Cop. And he is starring opposite the late legendary actor David Carradine. So please stay tuned. I'm Dr. Ava, and you are listening to Sex Drive, where we talk love, relationships, and sex. If you have questions, I have answers, so give me a call on our toll-free number, 1-877-711-5611, or you can email me. And in fact, I did get an email from one of our guests who was on today. Her name was Melody, and she said, I wanted to let your listeners know about an event coming up on October 2nd to 4th in Dallas for sexual trauma survivors. It's the Life Beyond Trauma conference with a set of workshops geared towards the partners as well as the sex addicts. And she said, if you're interested, go to lifebeyond.info for more information. So thank you, Melody. She was one of the callers who said that she used to be a sex addict and she is now a therapist. And that is wonderful. We are waiting for our celebrity to call in, Damian Chapa. And when he calls in, we will talk to him. But until then, let's get back to the fascinating subject of sex addiction. Did you know that there are 3 stages in becoming addicted? And I think Robert was asking me questions about this. In the first stage, the person actually believes that his or her addiction is healthy, normal, and pleasurable. And in the second stage, the person has conflicting thoughts about whether or not the addiction is healthy, normal, and pleasurable. So they're questioning themselves. And we did have a caller, I think it was Steve from Florida today, who I think may have been in that second stage. Now, in the third stage, the person realizes that they are addicted and it feels unhealthy, abnormal, and they start feeling more pain than pleasure. Yet he or she maintains and feeds the addiction. So there you have it. Those are the 3 stages, the progression in becoming a sex addict, or actually any kind of addict. And as I said earlier, here on Sex Drive, I do promote healthy, consensual, loving, spiritual, fabulous, juicy sex, but everything in moderation, including sex. Now, the most common methods for treating addiction, I had my friend Dr. Don call in. He specializes in sex addiction, and I remember I sent him a client because it was a male client who started hitting on me, and I thought, well, I can't have that, so who can I call? My dear friend, Dr. Don Etkes. His last name is Etkes, E-T-K-E-S, and you can look him up. He's fabulous. I highly recommend him. So there you have it. There is help for everyone. And speaking of help, Damien, my wonderful celebrity Damien Chapa has called in. He saved the day. He is the handsome, intense, talented actor, producer, writer, and director who stars in Bad Cop opposite the late legendary actor David Carradine. It is being released next week on July 10th. Welcome to the show, Damien.
Hello, Doctor. How are you today?
I am great. Tell us about your film Bad Cop.
Well, you know, it's a bit of a tragedy to see my good friend David Carradine go, but he gave us some wonderful memories, and I'm very, I really loved him a lot as a friend, and he's one of the best actors I've ever worked with, and he stars in Bad Cop with me, and it's coming out on the 10th. The premiere is the 9th. And we're very excited about it in selected theaters, and we hope everybody pays homage to a wonderful actor, David Carradine. And also, it's a pretty good film on its own, Mark, so we hope everybody enjoys it.
Well, I will be at your film premiere, and I'm looking forward to seeing the movie and meeting you. But let me ask you, now, first of all, you've played in a lot of movies. You've appeared in movies like Under Siege, Street Fighter, Mexican American, Blood In, Blood Out, and you have 3 films being released in the next couple of months, don't you? You have Bobby Fischer Live and Polanski Unauthorized. Is that right?
Well, you know, I've been working a lot, you know, and it's wonderful and I'm blessed to be able to work. I did a very controversial movie called Polanski Unauthorized. Of course, everybody knows Roman Polanski, the director, and it's a very intense film. It's kind of surreal about his life, and it's coming out. Actually, it had a theatrical release, and it's coming out on DVD on July 14th through Terra Entertainment. And also, Bobby Fischer will be premiering. It's a new movie about Bobby Fischer, the late chess champion, a very controversial, interesting film about somebody who lived his last 30 years as a recluse and made some very, very interesting statements politically. And you know, I started out doing a lot of gangster films and like Blood In, Blood Out, which was directed by Taylor Hackford, and it was a very interesting piece. It was about East LA and the culture there. And later now, in the last few years, I've been directing and producing myself. And these are some of the films that are coming out, so I'm very excited about it.
That's wonderful. And you've played some tough guy roles in movies like Under Siege opposite Steven Seagal, and then you played a prize fighter in Mexican American. But in your personal life, are you a tough guy or are you a sensitive guy?
Well, you know, I think that's a good question. But, you know, I think I'm both. You know, I think I'm tough when I have to be and sensitive when I need to be. And I think you have to be, as a man, to be both in order to you know, enjoy life and also to protect your family and loved ones. You have to be both, in my opinion.
Good answer,
however,
Damien.
You know, some are different.
I love that answer. I love that you can be both because women need that. Women want a man who can protect them, a man that can be their hero, and they want a man who's sensitive, who's in touch with his feelings and not afraid to communicate how he feels in the relationship. So I love that you said that. That's very cool.
I think everyone is probably sensitive, and some maybe they don't show it as much as others, but I think even guys that, you know, are tough and, you know, seem like they're macho and all, I think deep inside everyone has feelings and are sensitive and, you know, some show it more than others, but I think really, truly, all of us have emotions.
Oh, we do, but some people just, as you said, show it more than others. So what is your definition of a successful relationship? What do you think are the ingredients that you have to have, especially living in Hollywood? You know how tough it is balancing your creativity, you know, your stardom with a relationship. What do you think are the secret ingredients for a successful relationship?
Well, you know, when I was married to the lovely Natasha Henstridge for a little while, it was very difficult because we were both far away from each other. And I think one of the the problems that exist in relationships like that is you don't communicate because you're not near each other. And that's what happens in Hollywood a lot. I've learned a lot in the last 3 years, through a lot of learning curves in relationships, that, you have to communicate and you have to be together. You can't just say, I'm working all the time. You have to make a point to be together in order for a relationship to exist, because then you open yourself up to weakness, whether it be physical weakness for somebody else or emotional weakness, and, you don't feel a part of each other. So the first thing you have to do is be together. And make it a
so the
point.
number one ingredient is communication, right?
Well, I think that's one of them. And, another one is, you have to express your real feelings. You can't hold them in and be passive aggressive. I think this happens in a lot of relationships. And the main thing I think for a relationship is you have to be with yourself for a little while, which I finally have done. And I found a real happiness in being alone. And I've learned a lot spiritually, mentally, and physically about who I am. And now that is the point that I'm ready for something much higher than just, sex or something like that. It has to be deeper. But you have to be with yourself first. You have to love yourself.
Right, exactly. So many people are looking for someone to complete them, and they don't realize that you have to be complete in order to attract somebody who is also complete. So you do have to love yourself, and then you find somebody who compliments you. But I think those ingredients are awesome. Communication, sharing your emotions, and loving yourself. Thank you so much for being on the show. I want all my listeners to go out and watch your movie Bad Cop. It's coming out July 10th. I will be there at your premiere. Can't wait to meet you. Thank you very, very much. This is Dr. Ava Cadell. Thank you. You've been listening to Sex Drive.